You're listening to Business Success in a Virtual World podcast. If you are a leader navigating these new immersive technologies, this is your definitive resource to understand the innovative power of XR, VR, and AR. I'm Tim Barton, Chairman of Creative Strategies, and I'm joined by Barton Goldenberg, President of ISM Guide. In each episode, we navigate through new products, effective strategies, and highlight actual business case studies implementing extended reality into business processes. Our resource website now boasts over 300 case studies, 300 articles, and 100 videos presenting successful examples of businesses using these technology in field service, training, digital twins, customer service, in medical and manufacturing, and so much more. Check out the website at ismguide.com. Now, on to the next episode. Welcome back. This week, we're going to look at the healthcare industry. In the past, we've had podcasts and case studies of various companies and or major medical clinics who are using AR, VR already. But today, we're going to take a look at some of them closer and update you on the real impact that AR, VR, and the whole concept of virtual computing is having on the healthcare industry. Barton?
Thanks, Tim. And as Tim already alluded to, we launched our doing business in the AI virtual world back in February 2023. And we recorded several podcasts focusing on the use of spatial computing technologies, which I'm going to define as XR and VR and AR and MR in the healthcare industry. So that includes, for example, we did a podcast on Mayo Clinic, very, very interesting podcast. We did one on the use of VR and AR in surgery, another very interesting podcast. We did an interview with an emergency room doctor, Dr. Harvey Castro, and there have been several others. So this is not new. In today's podcast, I'd like to explore the latest uses of what I'm going to continue to call spatial computing in medical research and healthcare delivery. And I want to make the observation. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to cover until about, yesterday to be exact. And that resulted from my weekly Rotary meeting where we celebrated giving away 3 academic scholarships to middle and high school students at the Montgomery County Science Fair. And they were working on innovative approaches to liver and brain cancer drugs. I was incredibly impressed with these students. They were 14 to 17 years old. And they described the research to my club members that included the extensive use of virtual reality to help them share and view cells in 3D and extensive AI models to help them leverage extensive medical databases. So that's how I kind of locked in on this. But it's simply amazing how VR and AR and XR and MR have penetrated the scientific, the medical research, the healthcare community. That's what we want to talk about. So as I've alluded to, spatial computing is a technology that blends both digital and physical worlds. It uses augmented reality and virtual reality. It's increasingly leveraging artificial intelligence that's rapidly transforming the whole medical research and healthcare industry. And by enabling immersive virtualization or visualization, as well as real-time data integration, interactive simulations, spatial computing is now ushering in an entirely new era of precision, of accessibility, and efficiency in medicine. In fact, I would go so far as to suggest spatial computing leverages these advanced technologies to allow computers now to understand and interact with the physical world in 3 different dimensions. In the healthcare, this means 1, overlaying digital information onto real-world environment. And we'll talk about that in detail. Number 2, enabling clinicians and researchers and patients to interact with medical data and images in a way they could never do before. And number 3, simulations in a way that were never before possible. So what I want to do is move on to 6 use cases that highlight the latest uses of spatial computing in medical research and healthcare delivery. I make a disclaimer. We're really focusing on spatial computing, AR, VR, XR, MR, but one would be remiss not to bring in the whole artificial intelligence component into the use of these datas in all of these technologies. I'll touch upon it, and Tim, you want to go into more detail, but I purposely kind of stuck to the AR VR story. So case study or use case number one is one that it was well documented, transforming surgery and procedural medicine. So there's a couple of things here. One is the precision surgery and interruptive guidance. So now surgeons of all kinds, whether it be neurosurgeons, spinal surgeons, all different kinds of surgeons, are at the forefront of spatial computing adoption. They put on AR headsets and spatial computing platforms that allow real-time superimposition of the patient imaging, such as CT scans or MRIs, directly onto the surgical field, so onto the tumor in this case. This provides surgeons a 3D map of critical structures like blood vessels and nerves and tumors. And what that does, it allows an improved accuracy and a reduced risk of errors as they do their surgery. And they use this precision surgery preoperative, so they can simulate complex procedures on a patient using specific 3D models. They can plan the safest and most effective approach before actually entering the operating room. They can try plan B, try C, plan C. All of this can be done before they actually go into the operating room. And then intraoperative, so during, devices like Apple Vision Pro are replacing the traditional monitors that used to be in surgical rooms, allowing surgeons to access all necessary data in their field of view, minimizing distractions and improving focus. And why that's important is typically surgeons want to keep their eyes on the patient, on the operative field, but today, unfortunately, because they don't have always these AR, VR glasses, they physically have to walk over to a monitor to look at some of the things that they're seeing and so forth under a microscope. Okay. The second area on transforming surgery is remote and robotic surgery. So increasingly now, spatial computing combined with, here we go, artificial intelligence and robotics enables remote surgeries where expert surgeons can operate on a patient thousands of miles away using robotic arms and guided by real-time 3D visualizations. And this is particularly informative for underserved or rural regions where it's difficult to get into an operating room quickly, thereby democratizing access to specialized care. Okay, that's use case one, transforming surgery, procedural medicine. Let's go to use case two, revolutionizing medical education and training. And again, if you listen to the Mayo Clinic podcast episode, some of this was already discussed, but we've gone further. So again, a couple of different things I want to talk about. One is immersive simulation-based learning. So here, medical evaluation or education is being revolutionized by spatial computing, whereby the students and professors now train in hyper-realistic virtual environments, practicing complex procedures and interactive AI-driven patient models without risk to real patients. So they're not using cadavers necessarily as much as they were, and they're not doing this on real patients, but they're doing it in a virtual world where they have such incredible vision and capability and precision in the model that they can really do much of their immersive simulation-based learning. And that's done in part by holographic anatomy. So a learner can walk around and interact with the 3D model of a human anatomy, gaining a deeper understanding than traditional textbooks or 2D screens provide. It's also about skills assessment. So spatial computing platforms can now track a user's movement and provide detailed feedback, accelerating the development of surgical and diagnostic skills. So think of it as a feedback mechanism in developing your skills. And the other piece that I want to just briefly mention on immersive simulation-based learning is collaborative learning. And what we're seeing, and this is increasingly happening, is virtual hospitals and simulated clinic environments now allow interdisciplinary teams to practice emergency scenarios, refine communication, improve patient safety, all within this risk-free digital space. So that's the second use case, and that is revolutionizing medical education and training. Let's go on to the third, which is enhancing diagnostics and early disease detection. So you have AI imaging and analysis, artificial intelligence driven imaging and analysis. So spatial computing leverages this AI to analyze medical images in real time. It highlights anomalies. It suggests diagnoses. This only speeds up the diagnostic process, but it also reduces the likelihood of human error. And what you do a lot more now, and Tim can also talk about this because it's something he knows a lot about, is the continuous monitoring. So wearable devices, whether it's a watch or whether it's for diabetes or whether it's for heart issues, there's lots of new wearable devices that leverage spatial computing where you can track vital signs and detect early indicators of disease by enabling doctors to be proactive and create interventions before the symptoms escalate. The second type of enhanced diagnostics and early disease detection is in personalized medicine. And that's the real breakthrough today, and it's largely driven both by spatial computing as well as artificial intelligence. So by, again, integrating spatial data and genetic and lifestyle information, what clinicians can now do is develop individualized treatment plans, optimize outcomes, and minimize side effects. And that really is the next frontier of medicine, and that is personalized medicine. Okay, that's use case 3, enhancing diagnostics and early disease detection. Let's move to use case 4. This one is about improving patient engagement and empowerment. This is a very important one. So a couple of things here. 3D visualization for patients. Again, not new, but patients now use AR applications to visualize, and I might add their VR applications as well, to visualize their own medical conditions, such as a tumor or a fracture or an organ damage, all done in 3D. And what this does is it fosters a better understanding, it informs decision making, it gives a greater adherence to treatment plans. So the actual patient can see before they go into a surgery what they have and what's going to be done, and they puts them at ease, and they're just at a much better state during the operation itself.
Hey,
Then you
Barton,
have home, yeah.
on that particular issue, I can't emphasize how important that is for the patient. When I had my triple bypass, it was like 10 hours after I got in before I actually had the operation. But between that time and when I had the operation, they never really told me what they were doing. All I knew was they were going to put me under, and next time I come out, they were going to patch up my heart or whatever they were going to do. I had no understanding whatsoever. So the emphasis on using these VR tools to walk the patient through it, as much as, without the gory details, but at least giving them an understanding, I think that makes a huge difference in
Yep.
how the individual goes into it, because he's going into it more knowledgeably as opposed to blindly.
And you can actually add to that, Tim, both the educational component. So they're understanding, in your case, what the triple bypass was going to be, how the situation looks right now, what the doctor's plan of action is. But you can also use it for calming mechanisms. So, at the University of Pennsylvania, my alma mater, for my undergraduate degree, uses extensively VR technology for children with cancer. Because these kids it hurts, the cancer hurts sometimes, and they have no idea what's going on in their life, and it's very hard for them to understand anatomy. So they bring them into a 3D world of cartoons and characters and beautiful landscapes, and the kids immediately calm down, and they can do the operation much easier. So this is very, very important. I agree with you. A couple of other types of patient engagement empowerment that we're beginning to see now is home-based rehabilitation and therapy. Carries on a little bit to what Tim was saying. So spatial computing extends hospital-grade care right into the home. So patients recover from surgery or manage their chronic conditions using AR-guided exercises, for example, or they receive real-time feedback and support from clinicians remotely. So it helps them with the healing process. And then there's also mental and behavioral health. So researchers are exploring how spatial computing can expand access to medical care. Immersive technology VR environments can deliver cognitive therapy. It can do relaxation exercises. It can deliver stress reduction programs, all tailored to the individual needs and then monitored in real time. So this fourth use case, improving patient engagement empowerment, very, very important. It has not as much to do with the medical side, but it sure is important to people that are actually on the receiving side. Okay, two more use cases. One is the next one, number 5. I'd like to call it expanding access and bridging healthcare gaps. It's a bit of a wide space, but let me explain what I mean. So one is telemedicine and virtual consultations. So what spatial computing now is breaking down geographical barriers, enabling immersive telemedicine. So physicians can now conduct virtual consultations using 3D holographic representations, examining patients as if they were literally in the same room. You can also use a company, for example, or a device called Holobox and virtual clinics. And a device like Holobox allows specialists to present realistic 3D images and interact with the patient in distant hospitals, again, improving the access to care in remote areas. So all these things are developing, year after year into something more and more valuable, both to the medical community and to the patients. And the second type of expanding access and bridging healthcare, I call it global collaboration. Here, medical professionals worldwide can collaborate on complex cases, sharing spatial data and insight in real time. And then what that does, it leads to faster and more accurate diagnoses and treatment plans. There are local boards in all hospitals, but what we're finding now is through various 3D imaging and sharing through VR, you can get literally regional boards or global boards. You can get the world's best experts to zero in on a particular case very easily. Okay, last case that I'd like to talk about, or last use case, is achieving operational efficiency and cost reduction. And that's very important to hospitals who today are strapped for costs and increasing equipment and pharmaceuticals and costs for the nurses and doctors. And so they really have to run a very tight ship. So a couple of different ways this is happening. One, we're able to leverage some of the spatial computing to streamline clinical workflows. So what spatial computing does is it integrates, again, real-time data from multiple sources, allowing the clinicians to access patient information, imaging, lab results, all in a single intuitive interface. And what that does is it reduces both the cognitive load, but it also minimizes errors and improves decision-making efficiency. So all in one instead of running around trying to get different pieces from different equipments. And the other point to bring down costs is this idea of reducing hospital admissions. So by enabling early detection, remote monitoring, and home-based care, now spatial computing can help prevent unnecessary hospitalizations, reducing costs, and easing the burden on the healthcare system. Don't know how far that's going to go, but it certainly is something that's happening more and more of. I want to give you just two very, very brief examples of, I think this is very exciting, real-world examples and industry adoption of spatial computing in healthcare and medical research. So one is a company called Sharp Healthcare. And they actually have a spatial computing initiative, Tim. It's a whole initiative on spatial computing. And what they've done is they're pioneers in adapting spatial computing using devices like Apple Vision Pro to enhance surgery, radiology, medical education. Their efforts have been recognized by industry leaders and featured in major healthcare summits where clinicians and developers and industrial partners collaborate to build the next generation of spatial computing applications. So it's not just these one-offs, but it's the spatial computing platforms and the spatial computing applications that will drive the deepening of the use of spatial computing. And then there's another company, Endo, and they have an Endo spatial computer simulator. So this they launched a spatial computing simulator. Now this is specific to hand specialists. It blends physical and digital objects to create a fully immersive learning environment and allows for realistic practice of procedures, improving both skill and confidence. And the hand is an incredibly complex part of your body with an amazing amount of bones and tendons and all kinds of stuff. And this one now zeroes in on allowing the surgeon and or the clinician to really trial and error outside the real body. So that's a couple of examples. I share those with you, Tim, only to suggest that companies are understanding now that spatial computing is not only here, and it's only here for a one-off or for education or for 3D imaging, but there's whole platforms that are being built, and there's whole companies that are building simulation platforms. Now, this whole area is not without its own challenges. There's plenty of technical and regulatory hurdles. So while the hardware for spatial computing is rapidly advancing, and Tim might make a comment on that, the development of standardized, clinically validated software still remains a challenge. Ensuring interoperability, data security, regulatory compliance will be critical for widespread adoption. And you just take things slowly, and case after case, you prove the validity and the capability of the platforms, and you gain that hopefully regulatory approval. The other one is training and change management. Now, healthcare professionals must be trained to use these new tools effectively. All educational institutions and the medical schools, and for that matter, even in colleges, in the pre-med classes, are investing in education and change management programs to ensure smooth integration into existing workflows. The issue is never an issue of technology. The issue is always an issue of adoption by people and an effective use of that technology by people. Let me close by giving my perspective, anyhow, of the future, and I'm going to talk about towards a more proactive, a more personalized, and a more connected healthcare ecosystem. So I would observe that spatial computing is shifting healthcare from a reactive, fragmented system to one that is more proactive and personalized and seamlessly connected by integrating, again, artificial intelligence, AR, and other parts of spatial computing, real-time data. Healthcare is becoming, number one, more accessible, so bridging urban-rural divide and reaching underserved populations. Number two, more precise. It's reducing errors and optimizing outcomes through data-driven insights. Number three, more patient-centric, so it empowers individuals to take control of their health with real-time interactive guides. And number four, more efficient, lowering costs and improving resource allocation across the care continuum. As spatial computing evolves, I would suggest its impact on medical research and healthcare will only deepen, as I've alluded to, by fostering collaboration, enhancing education, democratizing access to care. I think spatial computing is poised to redefine the future of medicine, making it smarter, faster, and more equitable for all. In summary, spatial computing is not just a technological upgrade. It's a paradigm shift in how we understand, how we deliver, and how we experience healthcare. From the operating room to the patient's living room, its latest uses are already transforming medical research and healthcare delivery with the promise of an even greater advances on the horizon. Back to you, Tim.
So before we talk about the true impact and its future, I want to go back to your education and training point. There's one that we didn't mention, but it's important, is that medical equipment itself is incredibly complex. About 4 years ago, I was invited to go to one of the major robotic companies who provide the machines to do robotic surgery. And they had a demo area where I could actually put my hands into the robotic controls. And thankfully, I was just moving things around. If I was going to be doing it, if I was trying for anything else, I would have killed the patient. But it allowed me and them to do this, in an automatic way. Nowadays, and by the way, the doctor had to go to their facility to do the training. Nowadays, that entire process is virtualized.
Yeah.
So the doctor can go through the entire process, he can learn all of it, and then they would send them the equipment to the hospital, let's say. By that time it got there, the doctor would have already become greatly familiar, and his learning curve would cut back dramatically.
Yep.
So I would say that not only the hospital, but the industry that creates the tools are going to use virtual training, especially, to enhance the process and to take that learning curve down dramatically.
I would reinforce that, Tim, by encouraging our listeners to go to the Mayo Clinic podcast episode, because in that you'll hear about how Mayo Clinic obliges any and all doctors or people that will join Mayo Clinic as nurse, as researchers, etc., to have been trained on all of the equipment and the laboratory they'll work in long before they step foot in Mayo Clinic. So they will actually replicate the lab that they'll work in, exact replication. The nurse or the doctor or the researcher will be in the lab and know where to turn right and left and know which machines are there, and the dials on the machines are accurate. And on the equipment side, they will have been trained either by, as you've alluded to, the actual manufacturer or some sort of a trainer on the equipment, but again, long before they enter Mayo Clinic. I think what is very important, though, is the medical schools, and even as I've alluded to earlier on, the colleges when you're in pre-med, all this training is starting when you are 20 years old, 21 years old. And so and this Gen Z, and let's just say millennial, let's say maybe even Gen X now, they've been using this technology for a long time. So they're going to pick it up quicker. They're going to start at age 20, 21, 22, something like that. So they're going to be picking this up, incredibly quickly. And that's a real positive as well.
Yeah, I think if you were going to look at the role of AR, VR, XR, and MR on any specific industry, it's going to have probably the biggest impact on medical. As our friend Dr. Harvey Castro has told us and given us, and you should listen to his podcast that we did as well, that as a doctor, the VR AR technology is going to have a dramatic impact on how he treats his patients. And he's a proponent of it, a huge proponent of it. And hopefully we'll actually get him back on for an update in the next couple of months. But what we're seeing is a revolutionary change in medical training, medical education, and medical procedures. And of all these industries that you and I look at, and again, you've done work in CRM in the medical side, but the operational side, the executional side, and the entire process of using these new tools. And I'm fascinated by what you just said. These kids that are in the schools now are 20. I actually did 2 years of medical school at the beginning of my career, thinking that that's where I was going to go into, because I was aiming to be a pharmacist, and I had to go through the traditional medical school procedures up to a point where I would have shifted over to a pharmaceutical education. But during that period, I'm telling you, the book learning was incredibly difficult. And I struggled with it. Thankfully, I got into tech instead, which I understood a little bit better. And it just kept me from killing anybody, I suppose, in the future. But the bottom line is, when you look at what's going on in XR, AR, VR, and we isolated just to the medical sector alone, and as we continue with our podcasts, we will include in the future many more industries it's going to have this kind of an impact on, because it's not just medical. But I think we're at an amazing juncture where this younger generation is going to be trained on VR and XR. And by the time they are fully set doctors, in their early 30s or late 20s or wherever, they're going to have tools tools in front of them that they didn't have, that any of the generations before them didn't have. And I think that's going to be the revolutionary part of what's going to happen with XR, VR, and AR in education. We're almost out of time. Any last word, Barton?
Well, again, I completely concur. Medicine will drive a lot of the spatial computing forward. I make two closing comments. One, I want to reinforce again the importance of artificial intelligence in all of this. All of these machineries and technologies and headgear and so forth, everything is driven by data that is coming from artificial intelligence that is so much better and so much comprehensive and so much capable of feeding in relevancy. So we really have to make sure it's always spatial computing with the AI component. And the second thing, I'd just like you to close, will smart glasses become part of the medical community, whether it's nurses that visit your home or whether it's doctors performing surgery in the hospital?
Well, I do think that smart glasses have a lot of potential impact. The problem, to answer that fully, is the smart glasses today can only do so much. 2 to 3 years from now, and Barton and I will be at AWE, the Augmented World Expo in June, and I actually have a major session on smart glasses at 9:30 from the main stage on Thursday of that time. And what we'll see at that point is where we are today. And then my group will talk about where we're going. And what I know of what's in the hopper for the next 2 to 3 years, the answer will be yes. It'll have a major impact, especially on home monitoring, because the people are going to be able to have the smart glasses tied to their monitoring devices, whether it be for glucose or heart or whatever, and they're going to get real-time advantage on the glasses or information on their glasses of their condition on demand. And that's a big deal, especially if the patient has chronic illness or some other area where they have to really keep an eye on it. But yeah, that'll eventually be a significant.
These are exciting times.
Yeah, it is. Well, again, for all of you who joined us, thank you, and we look forward to being with you again shortly.
Thanks for listening to Business Success in the Virtual World. Tim and Barton offer 4 services to help your company launch, implement, or improve your AI and spatial computing efforts. First, AI and spatial computing customized executive briefing to ensure your executive team is knowledgeable and aligned on which AI and spatial computing initiatives to pursue. Second, AI and spatial computing strategy and implementation roadmap to ensure you remain competitive and successful in your AI and spatial computing efforts. Third, AI and spatial computing proof of concept deliverable to demonstrate to internal executive and external partners and customers the art of the possible. And fourth, AI and spatial computing quarterly advisory briefings to keep your executive team up to date on the latest AI and spatial computing technologies, new use cases, and ideas for your AI and spatial computing program. If you are interested in any of these services, please contact us at contact@ismguide.com. The AI and Spatial Computing Resource Center website can also be found at ismguide.com.